Good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome to this webinar of the India-New Zealand Business Council. I can see a lot of people here are already our members, so you know what we do. So welcome to our members and our stakeholders, and a lot of welcome to people who are new and who are joining us for the first time. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, just to let you know that we are the India-New Zealand Business Council, one of the oldest councils in the space, working to promote better trade relations between India and New Zealand. We do champion the cause of Make in India and also working in New Zealand. So our membership base is based out of New Zealand. All New Zealand-based companies who have an interest in working with India are our members or our stakeholders. So while we keep doing various events on the trade space, recently there has been changes in the immigration policy, and more specifically the Accredited Employer Work Visa. So this was a special category work visa that was designed maybe 1 or 2 years ago, but changes have made which have caused some kind of a confusion as well in the market. And to help us and guide our employers and employees in this journey, we have none other than the expert team of immigration advisors with Vandana, Himanshu. These are an expert team of immigration. They run their own company called Immigration Advisors. They are one of our esteemed stakeholders as well, with many years of experience in this field. So they are the best people to guide you. We'll have a very quick introduction, and then we'll hand over to Vandana and her team. They will take you through the different aspects of the changes, and then we have a good half an hour for Q&A, and we invite questions from everyone in this forum. So I'll quickly introduce to you as first speaker of the day will be Vandana. That's Vandana Rai. Vandana is an accomplished professional known for extensive contributions to the field of immigration and international education. Renowned as a highly reputed and trustworthy licensed immigration advisor, she offers in-depth guidance and assistance on immigration issues, catering not only to migrant workers and their employers, but also aiding international students and individuals seeking pathways to residency in New Zealand. She is the founder and director of Immigration Advisors New Zealand, the company which has flourished and from a single employee to now more than 50 staff members. Vandana is also on the board of the directors of NZAMI, which is an industry body. So welcome, Vandana, to our webinar today.
Thank you so much.
And we will be looking forward to hearing from you. Yeah, thank you. I'll also introduce quickly Colonel Himanshu Rai, retired colonel with a notable military background. He brings an unique blend of leadership and strategic thinking to the civilian sector as the CEO of Immigration Advisors New Zealand Limited. His expertise as a licensed immigration advisor is highly regarded, offering invaluable insights to individuals navigating the complexities of visa applications. So if there's a tough task to do, we sent retired Colonel Himanshu Rai to do the needful, and Himanshu is very helpful, definitely. Thank you, Himanshu, for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you as well. Next up, we have Tanua. I will just try and get Tanua on. Yeah, Tanua is on screen. So Tanua Majumdar Bose, with extensive 21-year tenure at Immigration New Zealand, significantly contributes to the success of immigration advisors. In her role as vastly experienced licensed immigration advisor, she is instrumental in providing clients with precise and useful information on immigration and visa-related matters. So thank you, Tanua, for joining us, and we look forward to having you on this discussion today. Yeah. Yes. So I will now leave the forum to the three experts, and over to you, Vandana.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Gary. Thank you, everyone, for taking our time to attend this webinar today. We'll try and give the clarification on the recent announcement and the policy changes. So just so that there's less stress in the industry and you understand the changes better. Tanua, if I could request you to share the presentation, please. Yes. So we're here to give an update on the Accredited Employer Work Visa policy and the recent announcements that have been made on the 7th of April 2024. So Yes. So the scope of today's webinar, if I may explain, we would cover the key policy changes. So what are these changes that have been announced now and implemented? How does it impact the employers, the New Zealand employers? How does the policy change impact the employees? And we would also be covering the impact of these changes on the employers' accreditation renewals and what is the new criteria for employer accreditation suspensions. So we would be covering all this in the webinar today. We begin with the key policy changes. What are the major changes here? The first and foremost is reducing the visa duration and the maximum continuous stay for most ANSCO level 4 and level 5 roles. So to make things easier, I would just give an example. So not all positions for not for all roles is the maximum continuous stay reduced. It's only for ANSCO 4 and 5. I'll quickly explain what is ANSCO. It is the Australia and New Zealand standard classification of occupation, which the Immigration New Zealand refers to when aligning the occupations people are coming here for working or furthermore for residence. So there are ANSCOs which are rated from ANSCO 1 to 5. So no changes for ANSCO 1, 2, and 3, and most of these changes will only be implemented for roles which fall under ANSCO 4 and 5. Also introduction of minimum skills and work experience threshold for most accredited employer work visa roles. As we move on, we will let you know what are these minimum skills and what is the minimum experience threshold. Um, Minimum skills in addition to what the employer has advertised on the occupation or on the job check or on the advertisement. So these minimum skills have kicked in addition to what the employer requires somebody to be requiring before they take up the role. Additional obligation for employers relating to recruitment. It impacts the ANSCO 4 and 5 occupations in the sense that they may have to advertise for additional week instead of the previous 14 days. They may have to advertise now for 21 days if the role is in ANSCO 4 or 5. And also making the employee or the migrant have the minimum English language requirement. Again, for the ANSCO 4 and 5 roles only. So if it is the ANSCO 4 and 5 roles, how does the English requirement kicks in? They would need at least IELTS score of 4 bands or an equivalent English language proficiency to be then able to apply for an accredited employer work visa for a level 4 and 5 role. And in addition to that, the level 4 and 5 for 4 and 5 roles, employers will also need to liaise with work and income, which was there in the previous essential skills work visa policy, but was no longer being required in the last accredited employer policy. So again, engaging with work and income is an additional policy change which has kicked in. If we move on, please. So now we have kind of divided the implication on the employers. How does the policy change impact the employers? And furthermore, we will discuss on how does it impact the employees as well. So we start off with the impact on the employers. So the first and foremost impact or what they would be required to see is they would need a higher work experience and qualifications requirement for an ANSCO 4 or 5 occupation. What it requires is the employers are required to check if the person they are selecting for a role which is ANSCO 4 or 5 has a minimum qualification. What have they list the qualification as? The person should either have a bachelor's or a level 4 or a higher qualification. If they have a level 4 or a higher qualification, additional requirement of getting the NZQ assessment done if the qualification is not a bachelor's is a major requirement there, which can take a lot of time. Yeah. Apart from that, English language requirement. So if they're giving a job token, if an employer is giving a job token to one of the migrants to apply, have to again then make sure that they're meeting the English language requirement. They have a IELTS 4 bands or an equivalent language proficiency to be able to then apply for an accredited employer work visa. This new policy also impacts in the the duration of the advertisement. Earlier, before the job check, the advertisement used to take place, was required to be there for 14 days. This has now been increased to 21 days if it is an ANSCO 4 or 5 occupation. And again, the maximum visa duration and the maximum continuous stay has been reduced to 3 years now. The employers are also required to take reasonable steps to make sure that the migrant they are giving the job token to is suitably skilled. So suitably skilled not only for the requirement that they have listed in the advertisement, but also what the immigration instructions now require. They are also required to make sure that they have at least 30 hours a week job for the employee. So that's an obligation which has come back on the employers now. Very important for them to see that they identify the ANSCO accurately at the job check stage. Because if they think that the role that they are advertising for or recruiting for is an ANSCO 1 or 2, but the immigration subsequently aligns it with an ANSCO 4 and 5, and that would have serious implications. So the obligation on identifying or having the accurate ANSCO again rests with the employers now. They also need to understand the definition of suitable and available New Zealanders. So we would discuss, and with the next stage I will explain what that means in detail. And also they then need to be prepared for a longer processing time frames with these changes. So if they need somebody to take up that role immediately, they have to make an alternate arrangement because the processing times are likely to increase with these changes. Could we move to the next slide, please? Okay, so what are the evidences of reasonable steps that the employers are required to take? Reasonable steps to make sure that the employer meets minimum skills threshold. They are required to see the relevant work experience that the employee has. So now what the minimum skills threshold requires is that the migrant applying for a role, which is an ANSCO 4 or 5, should have at least and a qualification which is assessed at level 4 or higher, or have 3 years relevant work experience, related work experience. If the migrant has a bachelor's, that is considered as suitably qualified for any kind of role. So even if the bachelor's is not in a related field, that's considered okay, that's considered meeting the minimum skill threshold. However, if the migrant the employer is giving the job token to does not have the bachelor's, then the qualifications have to be NZQSS. They would also need to see if the work experience is independently verifiable. They cannot rely on the documents which the employee has written, like a CV. They need to make an independent verification of the information given in the CV, and they need to cite those documents as well. Ensure that and this is all done to ensure that the migrant is suitably qualified. They need to conduct job interviews, take practical tests as needed. So do everything reasonable so that they make sure that they're selecting the right candidate. Just to make sure that eventually they do not realize that the person they selected is not suitably qualified actually. And they also are required to now keep accurate record of all the steps that they have undertaken. And and there's an additional form which they will also have to complete at the job check stage. We move on, please, to the next slide. So now, when they say there are no suitable and available New Zealanders, what is the employer required to see? The employers are required to see the qualification, work experience, and skills. They also need to see whether the New Zealander is residing in the location the job is advertised, or is even willing to move to a new location. Earlier, a lot of times employers would not consider a New Zealander for a role because the New Zealander was probably residing in a different city. So now immigration requires the employer to then check if the New Zealander is ready to relocate, is when the New Zealander should get the first priority here. If they are trainable. Other competencies like driving license, is it really required? And if they have, that's fine. Could do the job on the job training despite not having the qualification. So a bit of lower threshold for a New Zealander than they would have for a migrant worker is what it requires. Can practically make it to the workplace by having a suitable mode of transport if they are living a bit far off. Will they be available for work at the hours full-time required by the employer? So these are few of the factors which the employer can actually consider when deciding if a New Zealander is suitable and is available for the role that they've advertised. Could we move to the next slide, please? And one major step which the new policy change has brought in is the engagement with work and income. This would also mean longer timeframes before a job check application could be submitted. So again, I am repeating, the engagement with work and income is not required if it's an ANSCO 1, 2, or 3 role, or if it's a green list occupation, or the employee is being paid twice the median wage rate. But it's mandatory for a level 4-5 qualification, and they must engage with the work and income before the job check has been submitted. And a letter of work and income is one of the mandatory requirements with the job check application. The employer can liaise with the work and income at the same time they are advertising for that position in other areas as well. A very important tip for employers, make sure that the work and income or the correct ANSCO is selected before the job check is submitted, because job checks will not be held open while employers complete advertising or work and income process. In the previous times, before this policy change, if the immigration officer identified something, the employer would then go and complete it while when the job check was held open. This will not be done anymore. And if there are requirements which are not met for the job check, this could be declined and the job check would not be kept open. So very important to ensure that a decision-ready job check application is then submitted. And what are the impact on the New Zealand employees? I would request Tanua to take on the presentation from here, please. So over to you, Tanua.
Kia ora. Thanks, Vandana. Thanks for all that information about the employers. So now I'll talk about what these changes really mean for your employees, your existing employees, or the new employees, migrant employees that you would, you're planning on getting to New Zealand. You will see that some of them are probably similar, because a lot of the requirements are now the obligation of not only the employer, but also the employees as well. So we'll just delve into a bit more deeper into what are these additional requirements for the employees. First and foremost, if your current migrant employees accredited employer work visa is current, they can continue to work on that visa. These changes don't impact the current visa that they have, but should they apply for a new visa on or after the 7th of April 2024, then they will need to meet the new threshold and the new requirements as per the policy. The changes also impact any migrant worker who is looking to apply for a visa from on or after the 7th of April. So anybody who's now applying for offshore will need to meet the new set of requirements. So if the, and as Vandana said at the outset, is most of these changes are actually applicable for occupations that come or that are classified at the ANSCO skill level 4 or 5. The occupations in ANSCO skill level 1, 2, and 3 remain unchanged. So there is nothing to worry about, or there's nothing to consider when you're recruiting at those levels. But when you are recruiting or when the employees are coming in for ANSCO skill level 4 or 5, that's when you start to need to look into a bit more detail into what their qualifications, what their work experience are, and how do they sort of fit in with the new parameters of the policy. So if someone's coming in to work at an ANSPO skill level 4 or 5, the maximum continuous stay has now been reduced to 3 years. They first get a 2-year work visa, and that can be extended for an additional 1 year. But a fresh sort of job check needs to be done for that additional 1 year. There are also new minimum skills requirements that are going to be applicable for new migrant employees. And this basically means that they need to either have 3 years of relevant work experience, or they can have a relevant level 4 qualification or above. And if it's a bachelor's degree or above, it doesn't really need to be relevant. Any bachelor's or above degree is considered relevant to any role that they are planning on doing in New Zealand. Now, the other additional requirement here with regards to qualifications is that if it is anything less than a bachelor's degree, then the qualification needs to be assessed by the New Zealand Qualifications Authority. So evidence that it has been assessed at a level 4 or above, the qualification has been assessed at level 4 or above, needs to be submitted with the application. Now, there are certain roles which may be classified at skill level 4 or 5, but are also on the green list. So New Zealand, as you're all aware, Immigration New Zealand has a green list of occupations, which is essentially occupations that are in shortage or New Zealand wants to promote. Now, if the occupation comes in that green list as one such occupation that is listed there, then the requirement is to meet what is stipulated in that green list. And that would demonstrate that those employees are suitably skilled or suitably qualified for the role. Also, if the median wage that is being paid to the migrant employee is twice that level, or sorry, if the wage is twice the median wage, then it is deemed that the minimum skills threshold has been met and the employee will be deemed as being suitably qualified for the role. So this minimum skills requirement is applicable to all skill level 4 and 5 occupations, unless it is an occupation that is listed on the green list, or the wage that is being paid is twice the median wage. Okay, now what is suitably skilled requirement? So again, here it is the minimum skills requirement. So the employee needs to meet the minimum skills requirement, which was, as I said, 3 years of relevant work experience and a level 4 and above qualification. And they will need to meet any other requirement that has been specified in the advertisement that the employer has published for that role. So it is the two things. So they meet the minimum skills requirement as per immigration instruction requirements, and they meet the requirements which have been put forth by the employer. For any of the roles that are on the green list, the green list requirements are what will need to be met. So they will take over, and they will be the more important sort of requirements that will need to be met to demonstrate that a migrant employee is suitably qualified. Now, relevant basically means that it needs to be relevant. So it needs to be in the same field that the employee or the migrant employee has applied for. So to give you an example, if somebody has applied for the role of cook, say for instance, if they have worked before as a kitchen hand, then that is also considered relevant work experience, because they have worked in the same field. So work experience in the same field which they are building on to get to that next level is all considered relevant work experience. If your migrant employee has a bachelor's degree or above, then A, it doesn't need to be assessed, and B, that qualification is considered no matter what is the occupation that they have applied for. All right, now this is coming to the last section of our presentation. And for this, I hand over to Himanshu. So Himanshu, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Tanua. So As we start concluding the presentation, I would first cover the impact on employer accreditation. Now, as you can see, the franchisee accreditation would be ending sometime this year, and thereafter, if those businesses which had taken franchisee accreditation, they need to get accredited further, they would need to select either standard accreditation or high volume accreditation. Second point is that there are certain additional declarations which have kicked in, which the employers who are now applying for accreditation would need to commit. So the important commitments they need to make and they would be held accountable for. The first of it is the employers need to commit to taking reasonable steps to check each person that they're intending to support. So what exactly are the reasonable steps that Vandana had explained in detail previously? So the reasonable steps, if I can take your mind back to what Vandana had said, constitutes citing the qualification, citing the skills, testing them, taking their interviews, taking their practical knowledge test, and all those things constitute reasonable steps. Basically to make sure that whosoever you are intending to support fits into the role that you have advertised for or your business requires somebody to fill. Using third parties still requires ensuring migrants are suitably qualified and they meet the accredited employer work visa requirements. Previously, the record keeping was not so stringent, but now the employers must keep records of the steps you or the third party took to check each of the applicant who applied for the role. So that is something very, very important, and some employers will consider it tedious, but yes, these are what the policy changes are. So there is no option but to align with these changes as fast as we can, so that if at all immigration asks for the records, the employer is able to produce it and make sure that the job check goes through as quickly as possible, and you get the job token and you give it to your employer, who can then apply for the work visa and come and work for you in the role that you want him to work in. The employers also need to commit to notify Immigration New Zealand within 10 working days if an accredited employer work visa holder has stopped working for you. Previously, this obligation used to be with the employee who had the visa label clearly mentioned as to when his visa was coming to an end, and he needed to inform the immigration. But here, the commitment along with the accreditation needs to be of the employer to inform the immigration. And the last commitment, additional commitment that has come in is the employers must commit to notify Immigration New Zealand within 10 working days if the key people in their business change who are involved in the recruitment process. Could I go to the next slide, Tanuma? There are certain new criteria which have kicked in for employer accreditation, which may lead to suspensions or their accreditation getting revoked. Now, all the commitments that the employers are currently making, the obligations which has been invested in them, if employers are being actively investigated for any breach of accreditation, then it may lead to their accreditation getting suspended. Previously, suspension was only an option for breaches of some accreditation requirements. But the change is that now, if any of the accreditation requirement has been sort of breached, employer is sort of exposing their business to getting suspended for hiring migrant workers. The changes allow employers to be prevented from supporting visa applications while under investigation if appropriate for circumstances. So if the immigration views your breach seriously, then they will prevent you from supporting visa applications. So that probably will impact you. Next one, please. The last slide. is, of course, question and answer session, wherein we are here to address if there are any questions or any clarifications uh, which you may have uh, in context of your business.